kill you.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Zaku Talk. I am your host, Pastor Skeyhill, and with me this week is my longtime companda, Bob Skerry. That's your name. You just say it.
Yeah, I was waiting for the opening. Hi, yes, I am his companda, his compatriot, Bob Skerry.
And this season, of course, G versus Wing. This week, episode 14. But first, Bob, how's your week been going?
Week has been going pretty well. I've recently changed my setup over at my computer. You may hear a change in vocal quality. I am now, instead of using my old USB mic for the sake of the podcast, I have moved my professional microphone over here. I'm recording on an AT4040 for those who might be tech heads about it. And I know that Skeyhill can't currently see it, but in half a second he will see that I have my mic directly next to my head. So that should make things be nicer for you. Otherwise, had to take my wife in for her semi-annual infusion. She has MS. This is actually, if I recall correctly, if it's not this month, it is coming up MS Awareness Month. So please, by all means, keep your eyes and ears open and support any local charities that you can involving multiple sclerosis.
Excellent there. Busy week as always. Bob, glad
what
to
about
hear.
You?
So, Bob, this week I have been sent by some friends, possibly out of spite, a Nintendo Switch. And
I knew they were going to do it. I know exactly who you're talking about.
And all I've done with it so far is play Super Mario Brothers 2. So I don't feel like I'm utilizing the technology appropriately. What do you have a Nintendo Switch? What are the kids playing on the Switch these days?
I, in fact, do have a Nintendo Switch. When I do my streams on twitch.tv/BobScaryVOA, I will often use my Switch along with a capture card, and I'll play a variety of different things. Some people enjoy playing things like Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. The roster has every character that has ever been released from the original N64 up to today. And they also have a lot of new fighters that may even surprise you. One of the big shocking things this week at the time of recording was the release of information of who our next fighter is, which is Minecraft Steve.
I don't know who that is. He's from the game Minecraft, I bet.
Well, yeah. So Minecraft, you know the game. You remember when one of our other friends was playing way back in the early beta days, possibly even alpha days. But the avatar that you start off with is a fairly neutral skin-toned, brown-haired, blue-eyed, blue T-shirted male character named Steve. They eventually made another femme character that you could play as called Sam. So you can play as either of those skins as well as two of the villains that are roughly the same shape. But my brother was telling me this. Apparently, they had to completely rework every stage before releasing this character because they can actively destroy and build the stage.
Okay. Well, that sounds very in-depth.
Yeah. But I mean, there are a lot of other really great games too. And if you are a curmudgeon, like I know you are, there are plenty of old games that you enjoy that are hiding there. Whether that be like old, like you're finding on the Nintendo and Super Nintendo console pieces, as well as just re-releases of things like Final Fantasy X, 9876, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I don't need most of those Final Fantasy games. They're all on my phone, so that is sort of a better place for me to play them.
But I'm just saying, like, if you're going to be a curmudgeon and not want to spend $50 or so at a time on a cartridge. Also, Pokemon Sword and Shield. Really great. I know a lot of people are ho-hum. I think it's one of the better ones in the franchise, albeit it does have a lot more, how to put it. It is very self-aware in how big it has become, so much so that the world feels humongous. But if you're a big Pokemon fan, that's a great game.
All right. Well, I will scour.
I'll give you some other recs off air, but
I'll see what sort of these new games are and if any sort of appeal to me. But I just felt silly playing this game from 1988 on this machine from 2016.
Actually, there's a fun Japanese fact for you.
Yeah.
What we got here in the States is Super Mario Brothers 2 was not made as a Super Mario Brothers game.
Yes, I think I had heard Shinji, longtime friend of the podcast, Shinji mentioned this to me once.
Yes, it was literally just a reskin of a different game based off of, I believe, an anime that was around at the time of its making. But because it was never here in the States at the time, they just said, okay, this is great. We'll just throw 4 different Super Mario skins on here and call it Super Mario Brothers 2. And when everything ends, we'll just say it's a dream.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm sort of okay with it because the game is just so weird and quirky. I kind of like how different it is from all the Mario games that came afterwards.
Well, it gave us a lot of characters that we even use to this day that we just reskinned or renamed. Birdo, for example, has become a favorite among fans from yesteryear and has become a trans icon, in fact.
Yes, I do remember that, and I was trying to explain that to someone today, and they were like, why? It's just a dinosaur. And I go, well, it's more than that.
Yeah, it is a canonically male dinosaur that does choose to wear a bow and shoot eggs from its mouth. So
that you then sit on, pick up, and throw at them. I love this game. It's so weird. I love it. Yes,
but this is not a Mario podcast. This is a game. This is a Gundam podcast, isn't it?
Yes, it is. A much better Japanese property in my esteem. Though I know, I saw a game show clip once, a Japanese game show where they have celebrities on, and this one guy was a celebrity because he had never played a Mario game, and everybody in the audience gasped when he revealed that fact about himself.
Okay, so he was a celebrity and mentioned that as a fun fact, or a celebrity because
he was not like a celebrity, but he was famous social media wise because he was a man who had never played Mario. G Gundam episode 14, Bob, give us a slappy summary.
Sure. Shocking. Shining Finger defeated, or in Japanese, Shogeki. Shining Finger yaburetari. And before we go on to the translation, yes, all those words are nearly identical. Shogeki can mean several things, but we're going to go with shocking for this variation. Shining Finger is just shining finger. They were using the transliteration. Is that the right word here?
That would be a good word for it. Yep.
Okay, sure. And Yabure is defeat. Tari, I just found out because now that you've started asking me about language things all the time, I've started to pull up little tabs if I don't know it off the bat. But apparently Tari is a grammatical style of suffix to use as the past form of verbs.
Ooh, okay.
Or as part of the past form of verbs. Yeah. So that's just neat.
Yeah, I always enjoy constructions like that. They're fun. They're very common over in those Afro-Asiatic languages, so not surprising that they would do that.
Absolutely. But to summarize, Rain notices that there are 4 unidentified objects heading for Earth. She also notices that Master is going into an abandoned subway station. She follows him and loses him. Here, she is hypnotized by a strange light and follows it to where she finds all of Domon's friends, crew members. They explain to her that they were brought there just like she and Domon were, and that something is wrong with their pilots. As they emerge from the station, they see Domon being beaten by the 4 Gundam fighters. They exclaim they no longer care about their past ambitions. Master Asia comes and tries to trick Domon into joining with the others. However, Rain makes Domon realize that his master is a servant of the Devil Gundam. Master Asia transforms his Kowloon Gundam into the Gundam that almost destroyed Domon, the Master Gundam. Before he is almost successful in recruiting Domon, the 4 unidentified objects land and reveal themselves to be the Shuffle Alliance, the strongest Gundam fighters. After a small discussion, Master Asia retreats for the time being and says that Domon is no longer his, they say pupil here, but no longer his disciple.
Makes sense to me. And over here in Gundam Wing, we have the order to destroy 01, or in the Japanese, 01 Bakuna Shirei.
Yeah, so fun fact, Bakuna.
Yes.
You may have heard the term Baku before. Bakugo, or something to that effect, generally translates to explosion or blast. So oftentimes when you see the bomb creatures in Final Fantasy, they will often have that associated with them. And fans of Yu-Gi-Oh! May have also noticed that there are a couple of cards that will also stay the Bakugo, Bakugan, so on and so forth. It's explosion.
Oh, okay. That is a fun little route to learn. All right, in this episode, Hiro places his fate in the hands of Sylvia Noventa, the granddaughter of Field Marshal Noventa, who Hiro killed at New Edward's base, while Relina openly defies Duke Dermail, the leader of the Romefeller Foundation, an organization of nobles with monetary and military support for Oz. This act impresses Treize. Meanwhile, Zex begins to reconstruct the Wing Gundam until suspicious officials from Romefeller order him to destroy its remains. And though Zex complies, it is revealed that he has arranged for a dummy to be destroyed. And so sounds like we got a busy week going on here in the Gundam land.
We certainly do.
This is another episode where I just wish, and I know it's sort of not a big focus of the episode, I wish they had titled the G Gundam episode just a little differently.
Agreed. No, I 100% agree with you. I think it was just, again, the sensationalization of the title to try and grab audience members, as opposed to having it be the focus, which is one of the reasons why initially I was reluctant to give to you that lead-ins were rife with information that might be spoilery. Not that it isn't true, but I think that one of the ways that they've tried to get around that in the past is to omit certain points of information in terms of what is in the title versus what the content of the actual episode is.
That can make sense there. Where is this? Is there, Bob, as a Japanophile, is there a word for that?
So I think that it, Nihon file, something to that effect, but go on.
Yeah. As a weeaboo, Bob, is there a reason
I knew you were going to do that.
Why they have picked Shinjuku? Is this sort of like a very significant place in Japan?
Well, yeah, Shinjuku is one of the major epicenters of Tokyo on the grander scale. Much like Manhattan has the 5 boroughs, right? In Japan, you have all these different prefectures that are similar in terms of styling as to what we know as the boroughs of New York. So if you go to Japan, you have Shinjuku, Harajuku, you have Akihabara. Those 3 I know because, again, I'm a weeb. But there are several others in the area, Asakusa and a few others, I believe. And each of those different areas are well known for different parts of the city's culture. If you go to Akihabara, while many will initially think, oh, yeah, that's Geek Town, mostly true. But it actually stems from it being the electronics epicenter, and that happened to attract a lot of people who were back in the day more productive styles of nerds that would like purchase electronics to then build their own thing or do certain types of businesses involving the necessity for systems and what have you. So you can find really good rare finds there, as well as games and toys and the like.
Is this like their Silicon Valley sort of area?
Well, not as much in terms of hard production, as much as sales. If you were to compare it to something, I would sooner say, there's hard to find a one-to-one in American terms, but I mean, the entire area is like, if you've been to a convention, not the convention, but the shops around the convention that try to cater to those people going there, it's like that, but long term. That is a very layman way of going about it, as I am not a Japanese sociologist in the slightest. But that is the closest that I can do as a layman to other laymen over the stream here.
Sounds good to
but
me.
then you have places like Harajuku and Shinjuku. Harajuku is well known for its fashion.
Okay, so this one borough is like electronics, another one's fashion. So what is Shinjuku's thing?
It's been a while since I've had to recall Shinjuku directly, but I want to say it's probably close to akin to Times Square. The main place that we've been in, as we recall from an episode or two, has been the Diet Building, which is very similar to our Capitol Hill, right? Over here in Boston or whatever. That is of similar make, but it is much more important in that if I recall the importance of it directly, it's closer to being like a Washington, D.C. style House of Reps. Mm-hmm. It's the what do they call it? Parliament. It's like a parliamentary building.
Yes, I actually have learned a great deal about that building thanks to the first Mothra movie.
Oh, good. You'll also learn about it when you eventually get around to playing Persona 5, you absolute trash man.
I've got an hour into it. I'm at the very beginning of the first dungeon.
One whole hour.
I know. I still have so much FF7 Remake to get through, too.
I
think
know,
I'm also only an hour into that one as well.
No, that's fine. I mean, Lord. You're also trying to be an adult.
I know. It's tricky. And now I'm distracted by a couple levels of Super Mario Brothers 2. So that's where we're at.
Hey, I've never gotten past after the Birdo fight. I think I've never gotten really past that next area. So if you're further than that, good for you, bud.
It is sort of a weird, tricky game. I'm not a great gamer. So the Rain sees these things coming to Earth. She's in one of these buildings with a screen, and there are two people with her. Are these like Master Asia's people, or are these people that she has worked with before?
So the people that are in the building, Master Asia is ancillary to what is happening in the area. Okay. All those other people, those are residents of the Earth's Tokyo after everything has occurred. Because the Death Army has found their way to destroying and causing mayhem, it has made the Diet Building effectively a refugee zone. So everybody has been staying within range of that building in order to maintain themselves and try to make sure that they are safe for the time being. Master Asia, up until this episode, has been seen as a savior of sorts, a prime warrior that has been helpful in leading the resistance against this Death Army. So
I asked because one of the people she's talking to has like a cowboy hat on, this Japanese cowboy guy. I love this guy. Is he in any more? Do we get to see him again?
I don't know. And I think it's just to try and show that he is the lax and ineffective character that is often complimentary to the Dudley Do-Right that is on her right. So it's just to create her being in the middle of a non-argument, a simple office dispute, even in this whole refugee situation. But it also gives her the ability to get away while the two of them just argue. So that's helpful in knowing that we don't know where she's going.
Yes. Great. I'm glad that they sort of do this reveal on Master Asia so early. I think you would have run into trouble had you tried to extend it out a little more. I think you would have tipped your hand too much. So it's good they didn't try to stretch that out too much with all the hints they had been dropping. We're clearly in the middle of some action still, even though they sort of pull away at the end. We're definitely setting up for more of this same next episode. So I won't ask too many questions that might get resolved then. But two that I have that I think can be asked now is one, why does Master Asia, I presume, leads her into that area where she rescues everybody else because she thinks those zombies are going to just kill her and take care of this problem?
Well, so not quite. They try to explain it. I don't know how well they do it in the English dub, but the people who are the support crew for each of the other four that have been taken say that they were also led similarly to how Rain had been, and they followed the lights until they found themselves awake in the pods. She happened to awaken before getting to one of the pods that would lock her in.
So what awoke her? Was there anything, or she just did it?
I think it was just a fluke, honestly.
Okay.
There's a lot that goes on in the scene that might be contradicted later, very much like something that I will bring up if you don't, involving the fights in a bit.
Okay. Yeah, I might not. Fights I found are harder for me to watch, so I'm interested to know what sort of you noticed that I could have easily missed.
Do you want me to press on to that then?
Yeah, let's
or
just
did you have a second question?
Yeah, so I guess the other question is, and this might get answered or contradicted later too, is when these other backup people are explaining how their fighters got kidnapped, they make it sound like sort of a swifter process. But like Master Asia's taking like 3 episodes to do some sort of master plan to get Domon on his side. Was there at any point he could have done whatever he was trying to do earlier? Did he need to do all this first?
Again, I will give you what you need to know right now.
Yeah.
Things may be changed later on, but as of this moment, the other 4 have no connection to Master Asia. Mm-hmm. He calls out for a Gundam fight with them. And during the course of that Gundam fight, the side people get pulled away, and then they see that their fighter counterparts, are in front of them while they lay in a semi-dormant state in the pod, and they're all being taken by Master Asia. They've all been hypnotized in a similar fashion.
Okay, but he can't hypnotize Domon, or he needs to.
He has more respect for Domon because he is his disciple.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
A little bit. So
he figured it would be a lot easier to just get on his good side and let him have a little bit of time before turning him into his right hand.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah. You brought up another interesting question, though. Is Master Asia in this tournament? Is he allowed to challenge these people to fights?
Yeah. No, he says in the very first episode that he is still fighting on behalf of Neo Hong Kong.
Oh, yes, that is true. Okay, great. So that all makes sense there. All right, yeah, now we can talk about this fight. Although I will say it would have been nice, right, because they introduced it like, oh, no, there are hundreds of these foot soldiers, they call them. But no, let's go after Frenchman. But like then once Domon gets to Frenchman, all the other guys are gone. And I don't mind that he does this one-on-one and maybe some of the people handle the henchmen, but it feels like we don't see them at all anymore. Like they were never there.
The Death Army?
Yeah. Is this sort of a common thing in the trope of like you have them there to set up sort of what the stakes are, but then you just sort of hide them while you're doing the important battle?
Sort of. So I'm going to go to a place that I don't like to go, but I know will help you.
Okay.
Remember Power Rangers?
I remember some things of Power Rangers. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, if you recall Power Rangers, it would be that you would have your monster of the week.
Yes.
And you would have your putties.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The putties would all be taken care of by the extra members.
Yeah.
And whoever's story arc it was would be the one that would force their way through to have their moment against the monster of the week.
Yeah.
Okay. It is based on, they play it up to the ideas of strategy and battle, Sun Tzu, all that jazz. But in this case, it is the idea that if you have all these mindless automatons forcing their way forward and you have someone leading, if you get rid of the leader, it should be a lot easier to demoralize, or at the very least, with the sake of the automatons, remove the will to press forward.
Okay, yeah, I guess, I do remember some of that, what you described in the Power Rangers, and watching people punch these putties in their discs and then like they melt.
That was only after the second season.
Okay, well, that's what sticks out in my mind. But like, what would have been nice is, and I know you don't have any fighters because it's just him and Master Asia who's quickly going to turn. But to see the robots, I don't know, marching towards the city or destroying other things, or Master Asia trying to hold them off, just so we know, like, okay, yes, that's still they're not just sitting around and watching, silently cheering this weird Coliseum battle that's going on.
Recall, though, that
and I don't even know
Master
if they're
Asia
there. Yeah.
is the actual head here. So he's and even one of the people who were captured mentioned this. He has been utilizing the Death Army to cause all the destruction around Shinjuku. He has never had to destroy any of these. He's been using pawns in order to create this sense of him being the hero, when in fact we've seen that the Devil Gundam is just going to continue to reproduce these machines and use these people infected by DG cells to pilot them. There is a seemingly limitless supply. It's not like in Gundam Wing where like there is a limited number of even the low grade Leo mobile suits, you know?
Yeah, but I'm just, you showed us a big mob of them in this region that we're worried about, but you want to fight the general. Then these other people show up and we see sort of more wide shots like they're there. These bad guys are now leaving. But this army is just gone. They're just...
There's a lot of unspoken understanding that, okay, now that Domon can no longer see that these army people are here because he's so focused on this fight, Master Asia is just going to go ahead and be like, yeah, you can go now. The plan is working perfectly. Fuck off already. Something to that effect. So you will then have all this stuff happen off screen because the focus is not on all that level of deception, especially since even if we are doing it quickly, we don't want everything to be cut and dry and just waiting for the reveal over the course of the episode. We do want some potential for something to happen where it's like, oh, maybe he's being controlled too. And there is someone even greater than Asia doing this. He's just being the face for that person. We have to wait until that is revealed, which is not until Asia shows up and tries to hypnotize Domon.
All right. And so before we get to the ending, what do you want to get to in the fight you wanted to talk about?
One of the things that frustrated me with the way that they've seemingly changed some of the fight rules is on a number of occasions, Domon is shown to feel hits to his face when there is not any of the sensor stuff going on around his head. That's what we talked about before.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Remember, we talked about how Neros Gundam's fighter had his head squished, and that would be a lot worse if he had any sensors on his head, right?
Yes, I agree. Uh-huh.
So now we're saying, yeah, but I guess by way of the mysticism or whatever, we are going to have Domon feel the strength of these attacks is the only way that I'm going to be able to write it off without calling out the active disregard for it. It would be a different thing if they had shown like, okay, he's taking these hits to the head. Let's show the head getting dented more to show he is closer and closer to not only losing this fight, but losing his ability to continue to be on Earth as a Gundam fighter. That would have made more sense to me in regards to the hits to the head, as opposed to Domon feeling the electromagnetic force, whatever bullshit that we're going to use here, to have a actual dent go into his face, actually take a uppercut, so on and so forth.
Yeah, it is a very fair critique, but I think by this point, for me, the uninitiated, I've been sort of numbed by what you said, where like it just looks cool, so they went with it.
Yeah,
and
and that's exactly
the
right.
assault looks strong on Domon. We're getting the sense that he's defeated. I'm also, and for that same reason, I'm also okay with this big Master Gundam coming out of the slightly smaller other Gundam, just like he broke out of the Statue of Liberty. So
the Kowloon Gundam stuff, I give a pass to, because we're showing this metamorphosis transformation thing, and we're understanding that this may be due to the powers of the Devil Gundam allowing him to compress the full form, and that's why he has to wear the bulky armor.
Yeah, it's all fine. Like, it's nothing to quibble about.
No, I'm not quibbling. I'm just saying,
I'm just saying, like, that's why I can be okay with it now, where I go like, okay, it looks cool, so that's what they're going for. It's a transformation sequence, which is big in this sort of genre.
The only other skin thing that I want to talk about before we move on to what I know you're going to bring up next is I was at first confused why Master Asia didn't seem to have a suit like everybody else. He does. There is a distinct difference because you can see the black line that goes over his martial arts uniform. We're to understand that the design of like the little yellow line thing is no longer just a shorthand of the thing being closed. That is the design that they chose to put on his suit when he goes through. The thing that confuses me is why he still has hands as opposed to hands being covered by purple or gold or whatever. Yes.
Another thing I'm fine with just being like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, you write it off, but only because you've been so critical of it in the past. It made me more attentive to it in this fight.
Yeah, I don't know. You've taught me sort of what the rules are here. I think mostly I'm getting them. Every now and then something will be like, But overall, I'm just like, okay, this is what this show wants to do. It's what the audience is expecting. So why would you not give them that?
Now ask me what you're going to ask me.
Well, another thing I'm sure that they are expecting are themed mobile suits. And I don't mind the show doing them. I, Patrick, personally think they look silly and ridiculous. But if the Shuffle Alliance wants to be a deck of cards and their suits have to look like the cards that they are, fine. If that's where this show is going, okay.
Okay.
Why, if Domon is now part of this alliance, why doesn't he get like a theme suit? Or does he know who they are? Has he worked with them? Like, how does this alliance work? Or are they going to talk about that more later? Because I don't remember.
They will talk about it more later. Don't worry too much about these particular suits. Yeah. The next episode will take care of a lot of that information and whether or not it matters at all. But it is mostly another head nod to the fact that they're motifing, certainly, but there was a Sentai, the second Sentai before we started seeing all those Power Ranger shows that you kids know as becoming Super Sentai and having big robos.
Yeah.
It was called Jack Dengekitai. Jack here being spelled Jakq.
Okay.
So Jack, standing for Jack, Ace, King, Queen, is composed of these four members initially who each represent one of these four cards and one of the four suits.
Yeah.
Later on, that show will get a fifth member who does not have a suit designation, but is called Big One and is well known because he is this really bombastic leader character that has the four powers that are split among the other four.
Okay. So
he's like the Superman to everybody else's Justice League.
Okay, sure.
All right. But I make note of this because the idea of using playing cards and suits is a semi-recurring motif that Japan likes to use, and I appreciate. And in fact, this series made me become a fan of that at an early age. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, they look silly to one degree or another, especially when they come to the Earth in their enclosed shapes.
Yeah, I know. I know. It's what the show wants. It's what you guys want, so I'm accepting it. But then they're like, I don't know, like this weird conversation happens where they're like, you need to stop Master Asia. And he's like, your guys are going to turn against me. And then Domon's like, hey, just let him leave. And they're like, okay. And then like they just go. It feels a little anticlimactic and feels like an easy way to tie up the episode so that we can then jump into the next one. But I wonder, like, couldn't we just sort of continue?
It's Warriors Honor stuff.
I see. Okay.
It's like to give you the shortest version of that, it's Warriors Honor. It's we are not in a place to do this. I am not ready to face you emotionally. Please, Master, just go away. I don't want to fight you. To which Asia, at this moment, we're just going to use this understanding, says, okay, I'll give you this, but it's the last that I'm going to give you because I no longer acknowledge you as my disciple. Mm-hmm. You know, he still has his King of Heart crest and everything, but this is now Domon at a great low. This is one of our first climactic battles that we will see over the course of the series, where Domon now has only Rain in his life and no one else. All of the rivals that he considers worthy adversaries, if not friends, have turned against him and have actively beaten him and eschewed everything and are claiming that his estranged brother is the one to be followed. He is the new Messiah, effectively. Yeah. So to have that, to have his dad encased in ice, his mother dead, his brother seemingly being behind the plot of destroying the Earth and all life, and now to lose his mentor, the person that he cared about and had been with for over a decade, learning his techniques and training underneath, to have that hero tell him, I don't acknowledge you. And regular listeners may recall when I talked about the idea of acknowledgement and the lack thereof. To say that I no longer acknowledge you as my pupil breaks his heart. He has nobody now. This poor kid is left to his tears as he has to deal with the knowledge that he will soon have to face his former master in order to get to the Devil Gundam.
Yes, I think it's a good moment. I think it sort of ushers us into our second act of this series quite nicely.
Yes.
If I were redoing this show, I would actually like to get more out of that moment by setting it up in those first couple episodes where he meets the other main characters as he's fighting them and using some technique to beat them. I would like to do like a little flashback where like he's learning it from Master Asia or something, so that we know like there is this important guy in his life, this mentor that we see him teaching Domon and helping him become the man he is today. And you get two things out of it. One, you could get like this stark contrast between what Domon is like as the show begins and what he was like when he was younger and under Master Asia. And so you'd be like, wow, how did he end up like that? He seems like a jerk now, but he's loving life then and he's having fun and respectful then. So that'd be interesting. And then two, once you get here, you have more than just these couple episodes to see Domon with Master Asia. And then when it hits, it could really just punch you right in the gut. So that would be sort of a fun thing to kind of add in if it ever gets redone or has a longer manga version of it.
Oh, I would love that. Unfortunately, I don't think G Gundam has nearly as much love as you might think, because it is, as you mentioned before we even started this podcast, such a different entity from the rest of the Gundam universe. And I think the closest that we've ever gotten to it is the recent Gundam Build Fighters and Gundam Build Fighters Try.
Gundam Build Fighters Try is the sequel to that the stuff where they play them in the real world versus the two that take place in a video game.
Okay. Well, nonetheless, it seems as though those are the closest that we will ever get to coming back to a G Gundam style world. And you know that if anything is ever announced where they're either going to remake it a la Gundam Destiny, right?
Oh,
If they ever remake it a la Gundam Destiny or take another series and put it into Future Century, I will first defecate in whatever pantaloons I have, and then I'm going to immediately call you.
Yeah, Gundam Build Fighters, they're not sort of like a G Gundam style show. They're not really in that same vein and operating on that level.
Well, they play more like a card game show.
Yeah, it's like a card game show where there's actually a lot of elements of sports anime in there that I've been able to find appealing in it. This sort of working as a team and overcoming your own limits and sort of the fun type of opponents you get to face. And certainly, a much more comedic type show. So,
well, I hope that you start seeing that after this little arc finishes, because a lot of that sort of thing will start showing up if you add that aspect in your head.
Yeah, I think there's a reason why I remember the tournament fight stuff more.
Certainly.
So,
okay.
Did I talk about what you thought I was going to ask about, or do you want to move on to Gundam Wing?
You talked about the fact that there were the silly shapes of these strongest Gundam fighters.
That's like... All right, but looks like we're going to see them.
So I will make note of one last thing about that. Okay. My wife asked while we were watching, as again, long-term listeners will know, my wife is watching these alongside me while we do this podcast. She asked why Master Asia's Gundam did not look like a heart.
Yeah. Also fair.
My personal belief is that the Master Gundam is that Abomination version. It has a lot of notes in its shape and coloration that show that it is a hardened, blackened heart. It still retains some of the red colors you would assume the heart would have. It has a silhouette that has those two horns that come out of its head. They look like they belong as part of a broken heart. So there are a number of shapes and colors that are supposed to impart the idea that this is a dark transformation, a abomination of what once was the Gundam of the King of Hearts. It appears that these Gundams are supposed to be outside of the rules of the Gundam fight, that they are, and I'm not going to try and get into it too much. They should talk about it next episode, but they are an outside body that has less to do with the Olympic sport of Gundam fighting and more about the philosophy of Gundam fighting.
All right. Well, we have that to look forward to next week. Let's move on to Wing Gundam. Bob, what stood out to you in this week's edition?
Well, first, I guess, was how similar Noventa's granddaughter seemed to look in comparison to Relena.
Mm-hmm, yes. Mm-hmm.
To the point where I got confused when when I got confused at first when I saw her with Noin on the boat. Like, are we trying to do like a Prince and the Pauper swap here? Is that what this episode's going to try and pull off? Like some sort of a assassination attempt while Relena tries to take on the guise of Noventa's granddaughter? That did not come out. I do appreciate that the Roma feller definitely doesn't sound like another fairly American body of any kind. Nope. Mm-hmm. Talking about how they believe that there should be a ruling class. It should be made of the wealthy elite, and that there are apparently these misguided understandings of equality and freedom. So, it's not anime never gets political, guys. Anime never talks about real world politics. It's only about 15 episode power ups. Only about that. Only ever about Gundams shaped like robots that are playing cards. That's all.
Yes. So, yeah, we see Relena in sort of her most famous outfit of the whole series.
Is that her most famous outfit?
It's often what she gets depicted in, both in marketing material and in fan art. Wow. You'll see it more in other parts as well.
Will they change her little header thing in the mid credit?
No,
then?
they never go back to that. It's too much money. And
okay.
We hear Noin sort of do a rare explanation for why mobile suits are humanoid shape. It doesn't often come up in most Gundam shows. And
I did appreciate that.
Yeah, so that's sort of an interesting insight there. And then we see that, in fact, Oz itself is getting its strings pulled by somebody even above them. And so we get to see Treize in this very interesting position where you think initially like, oh, he's just like them. He's speaking from their hearts. But then one seems to be very impressed by what Relena's doing and sees in her that will and strength that he's seen in the other Gundam pilots. And then you also get to hear him cover for her, and then you get to see him by himself sort of kind of mocking this organization that he's a part of, and get a hint of what might be going on in his mind, even though he never gets to say it. Just some more. They do a lot of their most interesting directing in the show on these scenes with Treize. After the first couple episodes, they find some interesting ways to say things with him just sort of being there. So we're going to do a lot of peeling back on these people.
I figured as much, especially seeing as we're starting to put a little more focus on the fact that the not Rocca, but Roma feller. Oh, silly me. I almost said the wrong name. But the Roma feller group seems to not like that there is such freedom in somebody who does seem to have some level of justice in his heart. That makes me feel a little better about Zex, but I know that also means that there's probably going to be yet another backpedal somewhere with his character as they try to push Treize forward and so on.
Yeah, so we spent a lot of time coming in with expectations on like, okay, these are our bad guys. We can expect these certain tropes and things from them, and mostly they hit them, though throw in a couple of wrenches just in the background. But then, now a quarter of the way through the episode to the series, we now get introduced to an even bigger bad guy that will begin to allow us to recontextualize these sort of Oz characters, Noin and Treize and Zex, and now it'll give us room to now shift our antagonists around and shift our protagonists around in their relationships. And that's what sort of makes this show great. It's sort of this constantly evolving show. And every time the opening narration changes, you can tell the show has like redrawn certain battle lines and certain alliances. And so that's sort of the fun thing of seeing the show grow and change over time. And, around episode 45 or so, Bob, we'll just sort of take a moment and think back like, okay, where was everybody when we began? How do they feel about each other? What were they doing? And just see sort of, it'll feel like years have gone by in this show when it's really just been a crazy couple of months because everything is sort of happening so quickly and chaotically. But that's part of the show's themes as well. So we also get another interesting layer pulled back on Hiro Yui. as he's going to go to all these family members' houses and let them kill him as revenge for what he did accidentally to Noventa. How did that play for you, Bob?
I think that we are finally getting to see the hero that we were hoping to find in this character from the earlier episodes. He is no longer this character that seems to be just a stoic automaton, like I said in the first few episodes of this. He is now showing himself to be he is definitely a very caring individual, because if he is willing to sacrifice his own life, it seems that it's definitely the programming that has been put onto him that forces him to show his feelings in that manner. In fact, there is a specific moment when Hiro has his back turned and is trying to talk to Noventa's granddaughter, whose first name I keep forgetting.
Sylvia. When
he has his back turned to Sylvia and looks over his shoulder to express his feelings, that it's the only way I know how to live. From the angle that she sees, that we as the viewers get to see in the camera, he seems to be with the furrow brow that we already know, and we think that it's just him being his usual distant, calculated self. But when it cuts over to from the way that he is facing us, his expression is completely different. And, you know, you can choose to believe, as I initially did before this podcast, that that's just a budgeting thing. But I'm also willing to believe in beauty. I'm willing to believe that this is also just, we are seeing from a different set of eyes that this is him genuinely trying to offer his condolences for his actions and his way of living to this woman who will never truly be able to forgive him for the actions of letting go of such a great pacifist leader.
Yes. And so we get, you know, not that he's no longer what we thought in the beginning, but this is another recontextualization when he says the line you mentioned, but also, you know, a little bit earlier, he says, this is the only answer I can offer. And so whether or not they planned that look in his face, you know, there's enough with the lines there to let us know, like, oh my goodness, this boy only knows life and death. That's the only thing his life has ever been about. And he wants to do a very human thing of righting a wrong that he has committed, but only knows how to do it in this soldierly way.
Whether it's Japanese, whether it's Anglo-Saxon, whatever type of story of a knight or soldier that you want to look into, the offering of the handle of one's sword is meant to show that you mean no harm. You are saying that should you choose to, you may strike me down. I trust in you not to. So he could have handed it to her by having the what is it? The nozzle, the muzzle, the shaft of the
barrel.
The barrel. Thank you. He could have handed the gun to her barrel side first, and that would show that he had the power in that moment to shoot her should she decide to take it a little too quickly and he had second thoughts. It could show that he was going to be manipulative in the moment. By offering the handle, he is showing that, yes, even if you choose to do it in the quickest, most cowardly, I'm not going to think about it, I'm just going to do it way, he was willing to let that happen. He is a man of honor in this regard.
Yes. Mm-hmm. He, you know, like where Troa is more, and even we see a little bit of it later on when he's fighting off, he gets involved in the battle between the Oz and the Alliance, and the Alliance is like, oh, we got to save this guy because he's going to back us up. And then he just sort of kills everybody. He's like, yeah, I don't give a shit. You've seen me and I can't have that happen. He's a warrior, but on this very merciless, like, it's just about survival for him. Where Hiro, also this very competent warrior, seems to be coming at it from a very different way. And we're watching Troa kind of learn this more emotional side of fighting that Hiro seems to possess that was hidden from us earlier on. So that's sort of an interesting note you have there about handing the pistol to her the way he does.
Yes. Speaking of the way he does, unless there's anything else that you want to talk about here in regards to that inspector or anything, do we want to go to the way we go?
Yeah, we can go to the way we go. What came to your mind this week, Bubbo?
This week, I will say that besides the reference that I made to how we're still seeing this idea of task force Sentai stuff showing up in G Gundam and the like, I am starting to see more of the not, I don't want to say Victorian or Baroque, but this definite older style of warfare starting to peek its head out in Gundam Wing compared to what I have understood to be the warfare that we've seen in Gundams prior to these two series, where it would be your more traditional idea of what war would be like if we were to use a space concept, even if it is sort of the retro-futuristic concepts that we would have had back in the 70s and 60s prior. To see it be treated more like knights, like these warriors who have a code of honor that is no longer seen in the modern day, it only adds to the idea of what does war mean from the fighter's perspective versus the politician's perspective versus the layman's perspective. We are getting multiple layers here in a way that I would not have believed would be shown in the show based on my understanding of Gundam as a whole. I am glad that you have finally gotten me to sit down and watch the series because it is giving me more of the philosophical aspects and not just the war is bad, MK mentality.
I mean, ultimately the show has to sort of say that by the end of it. But yes, it takes...
Of course, but I mean, you often have things like Saving Private Ryan or whatever that either romanticize or villainize the idea outright by just showing you the carnage, showing you the fallout of everything. It is not removed from this, but we are also seeing the living moments. We are seeing the spaces between the blasts.
Yes.
And I think that is important versus what I have always gotten the vibe of, which is either it is nothing but assault and violence, or it is nothing but I'll reference Star Wars here.
Yeah.
During the second of the prequel films, the what is it? The Battle of Attack of the Clones.
Oh yeah. Okay.
A lot of people made a stink about the fact that there was a lot of politic going on in that movie, where they do effectively roll call the minutes, so on and so forth, is what people will hyperbolize it to being. But that can be very jarring for a movie viewer who is expecting to see both sides, the fighting, which unfortunately the fighting lasts only a handful of moments, and it's generally just woo, 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 woo. Pew, 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 pew. Okay, it's almost childlike in that moment compared to all this like grueling C-SPAN in space that film evokes in a lot of earlier viewers. Compare that to, again, a Saving Private Ryan, an Apocalypse Now, Full Metal Jacket. Those movies are all about the violence and the sadness and the utter oppression that a warrior, a soldier might feel, no matter how willing or reluctant, in those wars. To have this spectrum of your classical, like, soldier of honor type of fighting and understanding of war versus this idea of, there are pawns and we must manipulate them, and we, the elite, are the ones that will be able to gain fruition based on how much money we're willing to throw at the problem. I'm glad that we're getting a balance of it and not just one or the other.
Yes, that's sort of what Gundam's always been able to do. It never likes picking sides, and that's what draws me to it, because it's not interested in winners and losers. It's interested in, why do we fight? And usually, like in Universal Century Gundam, it's like, what is in man's heart that makes us do this against our own self-interest? And so I find that very interesting. Whereas in Gundam, it's sort of like, what is the meaning of fighting? And how does it play into human history? And so, that's what we're going to explore from all of these major characters' perspectives. And that's what's very interesting to me. And, we're sort of bleeding now into My Way We Go. But like bringing up sort of those three war films, I think are sort of very interesting things, because I don't think Saving Private Ryan is very successful because it's sort of very schmaltzy and sentimental about this sort of strong anti-war thing, where Apocalypse Now, though anti-war, is more about like, how is it affecting the hearts of the people who are in it? And it does a great job of showing that. But not only that, it does a great job of affecting your heart that same way. You feel in that movie that you have been assaulted and that you are under constant fire and that your life is a constant threat. And you feel you are now paranoid. You've lived through that war. It's insane how well done it was. And Full Metal Jacket is sort of interesting in that it's like Stanley Kubrick doing Charlie Chaplin's version of the Vietnam War. It's this sort of, it's frightening, but at the same time, like there's a comic irony to it that gives it that fear and panic that not many directors could pull off. So those movies that I think are so successful that we're still talking about today are successful because they're different approaches to the war film. And they're not trying to give you a very handcrafted answer. It's just like, this is the truth that we have to acknowledge. And then we can make a decision from that based on that. And so where Gundam Wing will sort of trail off at the end being like, yes, the only answer is total peace, at least until we get to those last couple episodes, there's a lot of like, well, how do we view violence? Like what is conflict? Not even violence, but conflict. What is conflict in our world? And I think, sort of me as a person who likes to draw a lot from Buddhist traditions, this idea of like struggle and change is sort of a very necessary ingredient of life. And, even just a German Hegelian dialectic is the same thing. Like you have your thesis and your antithesis and you need them to clash because that's the only way that new ideas and improvements can form. So it feels silly to be like, no conflict anymore. We don't need it. But why do we conflict? Are there good conflicts? Are there bad conflicts? Is that even is it even proper to put morality on it? It's sort of interesting for me to explore and what I like about sort of Gundam shows as a whole.
So I'm now going to tack onto this. The way we go is now going to be the way we may be going.
Yeah.
So not only has your hand tilted a little to me about what I might be able to expect from Treize's machinations, and that's good. That makes me, while I don't know what it's going to be, it makes me already confirm a bias that I had based on my viewing of him in this episode, that there was some greater understanding of why conflict had to happen, even if it is coming at human sacrifice. But I'll also note, I hope that my take on this and having heard what you just said will start to leak through in a pivoting of the same concepts with G Gundam. It may not be in terms of traditional war. I get that. And it may be very genre. I get that. One of the things that sticks with me is the fact that it is a show about emotion. It is a show that really wants you to understand what it means to try and realize your goals, your dreams, and the things that you want to say but cannot. It does not do it in such a cinematic way as some other shows that have a similar capacity in their themes, like Cowboy Bebop, which is very much about what you want to say and can't say, what feelings you want to share but can't share. Evangelion does a similar thing, but they all do that with a very they have their comedic moments, but more often than not have a very oppressed, very sadness-driven mentality. We do have the martial arts background to try and push us forward, but I'm hoping that by series end, you will see that these martial arts philosophies that they've taken on are also going to be what lets you just see from the mind of a martial artist, a warrior. It is not done in the context of war, but it is done in the context of these philosophies that these people have taken on.
Yes, I think those are sort of three great examples that you give because they're all shows very rooted in their genre and have found different ways to take advantage of them to get across the very subtle or complex things they want to do. And so what my journey is going to have to be watching G Gundam is to find sort of the things that I hold on to and can grasp and enjoy about the genre that it's in. That's primarily going to be what my struggle in my work. To finish off sort of my way we go real quick, it was sort of brought up when you brought up Star Wars. People, you can get your pitchforks out now after you hear this. I'm ready for you. George Lucas is not a good director. He is not.
Correct.
He is a man who got lucky. And if he had made the original Star Wars 2 years earlier or 2 years later, it wouldn't really be anything. Now, I think the same can be said about Gundam. But what I just like that that in Japan, Gundam is their Star Wars. It's their Star Trek. I love how everybody knows it. Even if you don't like it or watch it, it's just there. Char Aznable is in car commercials, just like Darth Vader is in Target commercials here. Like, I like that world exists where those people can appreciate it, and that we're kind of moving over here with Gundam models being in a Barnes & Nobles and being in Target stores and Newberry Comics. And so hopefully as we open up more these sort of gates of anime and Japan culture over here, that we're able to integrate that more, and it will be a bigger thing, even though I'm not looking forward to this Gundam movie that Hollywood is making.
Oh, they're making a Gundam movie? I've forgotten about that.
Legendary is making a Gundam movie. It's been on hiatus, obviously, because of all this Corona stuff. And because it's Legendary doing it, there's a thought that at some point Godzilla would fight a Gundam, which on paper should be something I would love, but not if America's doing it. Mm-mm.
Yeah, exactly. Because unfortunately, when you still have the remnants of blockbuster culture looming about, it's not going to turn out okay. I will finish this before we go on to the Nerd Corner. Kotobukiya.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Kotobukiya is a brand that is also being shown at Barnes & Nobles, where they do have these figures, statues, and one of their lines is Star Wars characters, mostly the Imperial side, being reimagined as Sengoku style warriors.
Okay.
You have Darth Vader as sort of a shogunate style lord over a battle. You do have various stormtroopers and like being shown to be musketeers, people who use muskets in their traditional armored garb. Full kabuto, full suit, all that jazz. And I make note of it because of another side thing, because you brought up the idea of Char Aznable in a car commercial.
Yeah, I love it.
Darth Vader was in a car commercial.
Genius.
Yeah, you had this whole thing where there was a kid who thought he was Darth Vader, and you see it from both his imagination and himself.
Oh, yeah, I do remember
trying
this.
to do the Force thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like an old Super Bowl ad. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
yeah, like I don't, and it's probably a fault of Star Wars only sort of until recently being allowed to exist in movies. I just don't think that's enough time to do very interesting things, not on sort of a plot-based level.
I mean, we're going to have to do some sort of a film analysis podcast at some point with the way that we go about this. But honestly, a lot of people forget that while Lucas was involved in the production, he was not the director nor writer in many of the original films that most people like. And you get to see what his directing style and his focus is when you start seeing things like Willow, which is just trying to condense all three of the Star Wars films into a single film that was meant to go on to more and did not.
Yeah, like Star Wars has, both Star Wars and Gundam have like a Force kind of thing in them. But Star Wars is just like, all right, there's good and evil, and like, and blah, blah,
and
blah.
they've tried to backpedal and then forward pedal and backpedal again.
That's the weird thing. Like, once they try to make it interesting in these new films, everybody gets mad at them. And I go, what? He's trying to breed some interesting things into your stale world. But we just want the easy answers, and we want the good versus evil, and blah blah. And like even Darth Vader, Char Aznable's American counterpart is just sort of like, all right, I'm arrogant pod racer boy, and now I love this woman, and now I kill children, and now I serve the emperor, and now I like my son, so I'm going to kill the guy killing my son. And like, that's it. So like, it's, maybe it's interesting for the time and for film, but overall, like, there's not depth to probe there. Where Char Aznable, because he's in TV shows and we get to spend 10 years with him, we get to see all these different things, and we get to see this tragedy actually play out in a more humane way that George Lucas didn't even want to focus on in the first two trilogies because he spent too much time dealing with Obi-Wan Kenobi.
A lot of Star Wars fans who may be listening to this will note that had we never gotten rid of the extended universe, of which I've never listened to or read or anything like that, I'm sorry, kids, but that had a lot more depth on all fronts and would have been rife for stories. But Disney decided to just say, to hell with that. We're going to make what happened pre and post and you're going to eat it. We're not going to let you have your EU. And that hurt a lot of the Star Wars fans. And then really it hurt a lot of good writing. Yeah. Because there's a lot of good story for that out there.
So let's take a trip on down to the Nerd Corner. This week I have a fun one. I finally, on the Criterion Collection, they have released David Lynch's second film, his first Hollywood film, The Elephant Man, which earned him 8 Oscar nominations, which I don't think count for much, but helped him sort of become a staying power after having only previously directed Eraserhead. So it allowed him a lot of clout to do all the movies he did afterwards, Dune, but also more important films that he did after that. So you can go and buy that now wherever DVDs are born. On it are some interviews by film scholars and some interesting behind-the-scene looks and a couple of good essays in the books that usually come with those DVDs. The whole thing's been rescanned. The soundtrack has been redone. Does not feature director commentary. Lynch notoriously hates giving out commentary, and it's probably for the best, as it would take away our own readings of the text. All right, Baba, what do you have this week?
Well, I will say that, you know me, I like you, I'm a cinephile. However, I don't keep my nose so high on it, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I wish it was higher. I like junk film just as much as I like good film.
Yeah.
And last night, I found myself just scrolling forever, literal hours between a few different services that I have on my PS4 and just the numerous films that are available, especially now during one of the best genre times to watch television and film, Halloween, Spookmas, if you will. The entire month of October should be alternatively referred to as Spookmas. But I am looking forward to watching a bunch of good horror films that I've kept from getting into my catalog, like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
Great
circa
film.
1974.
70, yeah, maybe that, 74, 75. It's great.
Yeah.
That's a good film.
Yeah, that one. I'm going to finally watch the original 1968 version of Night of the Living Dead. I've always preferred the 92 version personally, but I'm going to make myself watch it because my wife prefers old film, old television.
Sure.
She made me watch my first episode of Albert Hitchcock Presents last night.
Yeah, that's going to be pretty good. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'm going to be getting these classics under my belt, but I'm also going to have some of my junk food. I will once again, at some point late in the night, watch Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I will finally watch for the first time since I saw it in theaters, the 2013, not remake, not reboot, but reinterpretation of The Evil Dead.
Sure.
I will probably find myself watching Evil Dead 2, and Army of Darkness at some point. The first Evil Dead is not a comedy. You can fucking fight me, and you can read it in the first book that Bruce Kimball put out, or listen to the commentary in it. It is a horror movie. It just happens to have a bit of the Three Stooge bits hidden within it.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't view that as a comedy either.
But everybody mixes up the first film for being just like the second film. And the second film was meant to be more of a horror comedy because those were popular in the mid 80s forward. That's why you have a lot of chintzy horror movies that come out from that point forward. I'm looking at you, everything after the second Nightmare on Elm Street.
The Nightmare on Elm Street
is the entire series.
The Nightmare on Elm Street is in fact itself sort of a parody of slasher films up until that point. So it just makes sense it would go into that direction.
Which one?
The Nightmare on Elm Street series.
So here's a fun fact for you, all you in listening land, but maybe Skeyhill too. There was at one point a sort of hat tipping war between Sam Raimi and Wes Craven. In The Evil Dead, there is a reference to The Hills Have Eyes where there is a ripped poster in the background with the nod that it is a good horror film, but this is even scarier than The Hills Have Eyes, one of the earliest of Craven's films. Craven then has The Evil Dead on a television set in the first Nightmare on Elm Street that Johnny Depp is watching just before his kill scene. Yeah, he fucking dies in the first movie. Get over it. It's not a spoiler anymore. And they do this back and forth at each other several times up until I want to say somewhere in the 90s. But to have these head nods is just neat because they're both great filmmakers in their right, albeit one of them has passed. R.I.P. Wes Craven.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think
I love for trying to get the meta into things.
Yeah,
it really did open a door using Scream as and even Proto Scream, which was Wes Craven's New Nightmare.
Yes,
those two called out a lot of meta contexts in horror films to the point where it is now a genre into its own right because of things like Cabin in the Woods, Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon, so on and so forth.
Yes, I will. And, for as much as I poo-poo modern / American cinema on this podcast, I have no problem with junk food movies. I think the writer I was obsessed with in middle school and read just about all his books over those 3 years, Stephen King, sort of said it best, where he said, hey, I'm like McDonald's. I'm delicious to eat every once in a while, but you cannot sustain a full diet on me. It is not good for you. And I think that's, it's a perfect way to kind of play your Halloween tradition up. It sounds like you got some interesting ones in there along with some pulpy ones, and there's nothing wrong with that. I got no beef. Well, we'd like to thank you all for joining us this week. I would like to thank Lev Van Rensselaer for keeping those knobs swift and shiny. And, of course, let's thank Bob for joining me this week and every week this season.
Oh, yeah, no problem. It's not like I have things that I should or could be doing, but, I fucking like you or something.
What's some plugs you got for us, Bobo?
I have both the traditional AC/DC as well as a grounded. But if you're asking where you can find me, you can find me at bobskerry.com, where you can listen to my demos for my commercial promotion, narration, and character reads. Please feel free to hire me if you want me to do anything from a couple quick lines. So that way you can scare the shit out of your kids at night when they listen to the recording underneath their bed, or all the way up to me actually being in one of your productions. You can also find me on voices.com, Casting Call Club, Upwork, and soon Fiverr. I've been dragging my feet on it, but hopefully by the time you're listening to this, it will be up. You can also find me on all sorts of social media by my handle, BobScaryVOA.
And I am your host, Patrick Scale. You can find my features, documentaries, short films, video essays, animations, behind-the-scenes footage, and so much more at QuixoticUnited.com, along with social media of various similar-sounding names. Thank you all for listening. Bob, tell the audience what kind of junk food you like to eat.
Well, I am just the biggest whore for McDonald's French fries. I say that because they could pay me in French fries, and I would accept.